All right, welcome to the Intern podcast. I'm Lindsay Aarons here with Yankees analyst Jack Curry. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jack.
Lindsay, it's good to be here and it's nice to get the chance to speak with you.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right in. How does it feel to be in a position to cover and break news on one of the most prestigious franchises in sports?
It's my job, and I like to tell people that because there is an excitement level to it and there is a thrill when you go to work every day. But it is still a job, and you have to remember that. I have some family members and friends who are unbelievably passionate baseball fans, and I call myself a passionate baseball fan too, but I'm passionate about my job and doing my job well. So I think it's a challenge every day, Lindsay, to make sure you're prepared that day, make sure you've checked in with your sources, you've done your research, you've studied some trends, you've thought about what might be upcoming for a team, and just try and stay ahead of the pack or stay ahead of the curve and have a better day today than you did yesterday. And the one thing I tell people, though I've been on TV now for the last 13 or 14 seasons, I really made my bones as a reporter when I was a newspaper writer with the New York Times, because that was a daily grind every day. And getting to learn how to cover a baseball team as a beat writer, that set me up for what I'm doing now.
Awesome. It's so cool to hear about. I know you wrote for the New York Times too, which is so awesome. And I want to hear about everything you've done. So can you take me through a timeline of your career and how you've gotten to where you are today?
Well, how far do you want me to go back? Do you want me to go back to being a 12 or 13-year-old kid who started a school newspaper at his elementary school?
However far back you want to go, I'm happy to hear about all of it.
I say that jokingly, but it is true. I had a passion for writing and for sports. And fortunately, I had a teacher in the seventh grade when I once asked him, how come we don't have a school newspaper at our elementary school, St. Anne's in Jersey City, by the way? And he said, why don't you start one? So I did. And Lindsay, all of these years later, I still remember the feeling. And it wasn't much of a newspaper. It was kind of one sheet of paper and probably, this has nothing, but writing on both sides. But when people that morning saw your article and were commenting on what you wrote, that's a feeling that it's kind of hard to describe. It's just a feeling of accomplishment. It's a feeling of success, and that someone is interested in what you had to put down on paper. And that feeling never left me. And I knew from the time I was 12 or 13 that I wanted to be a sports journalist. And I think that helped me immensely because as I moved from high school to college, that was my focus. I took all the courses I needed to take, and I did well in high school and I did well in college, but I was tunnel vision toward being a sports journalist. And when I got to college at Fordham, I worked for the school newspaper and I worked for the school radio station. And I thought that's twice as many jobs. And when I get out of college, whatever is the most appealing job offer, as if there were going to be so many, I'll take that job. I ended up working for the Star Ledger in New Jersey for a year, covering local, mostly high school and college sports. And then I was fortunate enough to get hired by the Times just a year out of college. I started at a very low level, but I ascended to becoming a reporter, eventually took over the Yankee beat, then became a national writer. And I was there for over 20 years and thought that that would be where I spent my entire career. But the business changed. I saw things happening in the print media world that I wasn't as thrilled with. I'd always been interested in the broadcast side of the business. And fortunately, when I left the Times, Yes was interested in me, and I got hired by Yes in 2010. And that's it in a nutshell. And I tell people all the time, I feel, Lindsay, as if I'd have two dream jobs. I was a baseball reporter for the Times, and now I'm a baseball analyst for Yes. Those are some pretty cool jobs to be able to say you have.
No, definitely. I mean, that's the coolest thing ever. I could only dream of having jobs like that one day. So that's really awesome. And I know that you've also written a few books in the past. One of them you've even co-wrote with Derek Jeter. Can you tell me about your experiences with writing books in general?
First book I wrote was with Derek Jeter. It was called The Life You Imagine. And I was actually surprised at the time that Jeter wanted to write a book. He was only a few years into his career, but there was a trust factor there. So he trusted me to tell his story. And I was very happy with the way that book turned out. But Lindsay, when you have a full-time job, as I did and do, writing books is hard. So I actually took about 20 years off before I then approached David Cohn, who I feel is a pitching genius. I had covered him as a writer and now work with him at Yes. And I wanted to do a pitching book with Coney. So we did that book called Full Count. that was successful enough that the editor wanted to do a hitting companion book. So we did a hitting book with Paul O'Neill called Swing and a Hit. And then right over my right shoulder, because I know something about promoting and marketing, this is my next book. It'll come out in May. It's about the 1998 Yankees and about how I think they were the greatest team of all time. So writing is a discipline, whether you're writing a blog, a newspaper article, a column, you really have to be disciplined. And that's the one thing I've learned in this process. And the one thing that sometimes you have to remind yourself. I've been in this business for over 30 years. And Lindsay, there are some days where you just want to sit on the couch and watch Jeopardy. But I've got to go upstairs and write a chapter. And you've got to sit down and you have to put your mind into making sure you can get the work done. A friend of mine, Laura Sayers, once asked me, what do you do if you get writing block? And I said, Laura, I can't get writing block. You just have to sit there until it comes. Writer's block. I'm saying writing block. Writer's block can't exist when you're writing a book, at least not for me.
That's so interesting to hear about all that and how you have the discipline to sit down and write it. And it's so cool that you've had the opportunity to do it with people that are really huge, like Paul O'Neill, Derek Jeter. And speaking of Derek Jeter, like that's so cool that you got to do that since he was the captain and he now passed that torch to Aaron Judge. What was your reaction? Because I know he had a very eventful offseason with like that news breaking that he was going to San Francisco, and then we found out that wasn't true. As somebody who works for the Yankees, what was your initial reaction to that?
Great question, Lindsay, by the way, because that is a moment I will never forget in the offseason. As you mentioned, there had been a tweet by John Heyman, who's a friend of mine, excellent reporter. John tweeted that there were rumblings that Judge was headed to the Giants. I was on set in San Diego at the winter meetings with Meredith Marakovitz, and we were getting ready to tape some interviews with some Yankee officials. These had been planned the night before. So when that news broke, Meredith and I looked at each other and said, do you think they're going to still come and do these interviews? Because if Judge is really leaving or was really leaving, that was about as bad an outcome as a Yankee offseason could have happened. I found out pretty quickly by reaching out to a couple of sources that at the very least, the Yankees hadn't been told that news. So once I heard that, I thought, if Judge was really going to sign elsewhere, the customary and gentlemanly thing to do would have been to contact the Yankees. So I started to think this isn't true. But Lindsay, I will tell you, again, that night as it unfolded, I ran into Aaron Boone. I ran into other Yankee officials. There was still a very morose look on their face. They were not sure what was going to happen. And as we now know, late that evening, Hal Steinbrenner, who was in Italy on vacation, called Judge and closed the deal and made sure that Judge stayed a Yankee. But I think whenever I talk about Judge on the S Network for the next 9 years, there will always be a part of me that will remember that 10-minute span or so where he almost was a Yankee, because that is a reminder, Lindsay, of just how important he is to the Yankees.
Right. That's so interesting to hear that story from your perspective, because obviously the whole world was like, what is going on right now? But like you said, he's the most important piece of the Yankees right now. So how special was it for you to cover that historic season that he had? And do you think that he could come close to replicating that this coming season?
It was entertaining and energetic to cover Judge's season last season, because as amazing as the Yankees have been in some of the years that I have covered them, including the 98 team, they did amazing things every day. What Judge did, Lindsay, was on another level, because I've never witnessed in my time covering the Yankees a player who time stopped for every at-bat, and every pitch was an event, and people got quiet in the stadium. Now I'm talking as he got closer to Maris's number. When he had 42, I don't think everybody was quiet on every pitch, but there was just something magical about that from a baseball perspective, to be able to watch that. And beyond the home runs, because that's what we're going to remember, 62 homers, some of them mammoth, unbelievable swings. I will also just remember Judge's discipline, his discipline to not stray out of the strike zone very often, and his discipline, Lindsay, to just be in a mental headspace to not let any of what was going on around him, which sometimes included silence, to not let that impact him. because baseball players always talk about not letting the game speed up. Because if you let the game speed up, it's the equivalent of trying to stack a bunch of boxes. If you do it nice and neat, you'll be fine. But if you try and do it fast, the boxes are going to tumble down. Judge never let the game speed up. As everything was speeding up around him and everybody was so intense and so tense, Judge remained placid. And that's something that's always going to stick with me.
That's so interesting that you've never seen a player like him, you said, because I know you've gotten to see the Yankees evolve over the course of the years that you've covered them. Besides Aaron Judge, has anything in particular changed the most within the Yankees organization and for you covering them in general?
Now, I do want to say, I said I've never seen that happen with a Yankee. I did cover Barry Bonds' home run chase when he hit 73. And before that, I covered McGuire and Sosa. And they had their own sort of might and momentum behind them. What has changed from the time I first started covering the Yankees, which was in 1991, until now? I mean, Lindsay, I don't think we have a long enough podcast to talk about what has changed. In my book about the 1998 Yankees, I talk about the evolution of how things have changed in baseball over the years. And I think anyone who is honest about watching baseball will admit players get better. It's evolution. They get bigger, they get stronger, they get faster. Nutrition is better. Workout routines are better. The coaching is better. So I think I have an unbelievable respect for anyone who has ever been able to put on a baseball uniform for even one game. And that's one thing I try to make sure that I constantly remind myself of when doing this job, Lindsay. I played high school baseball, and I went to one practice at Fordham. These players that I cover on a daily basis, they are the best in the world at what they do. And if we're going to talk in a post game about a mistake, I always want to remind myself of, okay, it was a mistake, but it was a mistake by one of the best players in the world at what he has done. And a lot of times the way I explain some of these things are, I don't want to even pick a player out. Gleyber Torres made an error. That's a play he knew he should have made. I think that's a very easy and astute piece of analysis. You don't have to slam a guy because the ball bounced out of his glove. He will tell you he should have put himself in better position so that his glove was in a spot where he could have made that play. I try and remind myself of that every day.
It's very interesting to hear your take on that. So thank you. And I want to hear what you think about what do you think the key to success will be for the Yankees this coming season?
That's a great question, Lindsay. I think they're the best team in the division. I mean, they won 99 games last year. Bringing Judge back was a must. They added Rodon. I know Montas was supposed to be at the back end of the rotation, and with the shoulder surgery, that's a setback. It opens up opportunities for Herman and Schmidt. I think every year you go into a year with expectations. You need some people to exceed expectations. And I'm looking at the likes of DJ LeMahieu, Aaron Hicks, Josh Donaldson. And I know Yankee fans have been ready to jettison Donaldson and Hicks, but their salaries are on the books. And when you assemble a roster and get your salary structure established, you sort of look at those costs as costs that you've already made, expenses that have already been incurred. So why not see what you can get out of those guys? Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention pitching. I mean, pitching is going to guide a team at any time, but I think they need some of those players who you don't know what you're going to get from them to produce this year. And you asked me earlier, I didn't answer the question. I'm just remembering it now. Can Judge replicate last year? Here's what's interesting, Lindsay. He could hit 45 home runs. And that would be what? I don't have a calculator in front of me, but that would be a 17 homers fewer than he hit before. And everyone might be calling it a down season, but look at how many guys hit 45 homers last year. So I think it's going to be tough and challenging for Judge to come close to matching what he did last year, simply because that was an historic season up on a mountaintop. He could have as good a season and just not hit 62. Maybe he'll have a few more walks. Maybe a couple of balls will die on the warning track. So I think Judge will have another MVP type campaign. I know everyone is trying to predict a home run total. I'm going to save that for the S Network. I'm not going to give you that big Jack Curry scoop. I'll save my home run guess for the S Network.
Sounds good. I guess I'm gonna have to stay tuned and see what that is and see if those other players step up and perform well this season. But thank you so much for your insight on everything. It was so interesting to hear everything you had to say.
Well, what about you, Lindsay? Before you let me go, I want to
Yeah.
ask you, where do you see the Yankees needing to improve, produce, and what kind of predictions do you have for them this year?
I mean, I definitely agree that players need to step up. Like you said, Donaldson and Hicks are definitely, I know fans think they're underperforming. So hopefully they'll step up. And I don't know about Judge either. Like you said, that one season that he had is definitely, going to be on a pedestal in baseball history. I don't know if anything will match it, but like you said, he could still hit something in the 40s, even 30s, and still have a great season. So it'll be interesting to see if he can replicate it. I don't know for sure. But I do agree that the Yankees are definitely, I mean, the division's pretty good. You got Toronto, who's also a good team. But I think, the Yankees have a lot of momentum coming from their season last year with 99 wins. And I think that they will also be successful this coming season.
Well, you're going with what as a win total prediction? Let's have a little bet here.
Ooh, I don't know if they'll. I'm gonna say it's gonna be in the 90s. I don't know if it's gonna be 99 again. I think it'll be low 90s, like maybe 91 is my guess.
All right, I'm going to go 97. So we're
Okay,
we're, we're going to reconvene at some point and see who was closer.
perfect.
Whoever
Sounds
was
good.
closer is the winner. And I
Sounds
will,
good.
if I lose, I'll give you one of these highlighters.
All right, that's a good deal. I'll take it. Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll have to stay tuned and see, and we'll talk again later in the season and see what happens.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay.
All right, thank you so much for everything.